All right, everybody. Thank you again for joining. We've still got people coming in, which is fantastic to see. My name is Alex Shammy from Namely. I'm joined by Mike Martin from Litmos and Christy Thurston from Namely. And today we are going to be chatting about how to keep employees happy at work through learning and development. We've got a really awesome presentation for you guys today that we've been working on that walks through quite a few things that you're going to be able to take away to build out an L&D program at your company. Keep in mind, this session will be recorded and will be sent to you after the fact. So if there's anything that we breeze through or you don't get your questions answered right away, just go back through and follow up with our individual teams. So with that, one second here. Let's see what's going on with the slides. All right, so as I said, we've got Mike Martin from Litmos. He is the Chief Learning Officer, seasoned professional. He's got a lot of great tips for you today on learning development. And the one and only Christy Thurston here from the Namely team. She leads the learning and development programs here internally and has a lot of great tips for you as well. So some things we'll be chatting about today. We'll first set the stage. We'll chat about what matters most to employees and why learning and development is important for your organization. We'll walk through some critical steps for how you can build out a successful program. And on top of that, we'll talk about some examples of L&D programs that are out there that you can kind of look into more and take back to your organization. So some actionable examples for you there. And then lastly, we'll talk about some technology and tools that you can use to really fuel the fire and get your program up and running. And I think everybody should have access to the Q&A section of Zoom. Go ahead and throughout that, just use it to ask questions, and we'll flag questions to answer live at the end. So we should have about 10 minutes or so at the end for Q&A, so make sure you get those in there. And we'll be watching here internally in the war room, as we call it, and we'll flag those to get answered by whomever party was talking about it. So thanks again, and I'm going to pass it off first to Christy so she can set the stage and we can jump right in.
All right, thanks, Alex. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of kick it off with, we all know this already. We know that learning and development is consistently linked to employee happiness and engagement. It's crucial, it's critical, and it should be a priority in every organization. As whether it's your sole function to do learning and development, whether you are the only person or you're on a team, or this is only a part of your function, it's still all of our responsibility to ensure that the folks at our organizations have the resources and the opportunities that they need to succeed. Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge for all of us, but it definitely still needs to be a priority. And if anything, it's a fun challenge that we all get to have our little brain puzzles with every day. What I want to do to kind of kick it off is we're going to go a little bit deeper, as Alex mentioned, into how to create learning and development programs, talk about different employee and development programs, and keeping employees happy and engaged at work. This is really great in the long run because they stick around, they're more productive, they're more engaged with our organization. And I want to start talking about three major topics. I'm going to talk about making sure that our employees have the access to the learning and development that they need, that they see clear growth and opportunities for their careers, and that we as an organization set clear expectations about their roles and about their success at our organizations. So in terms of access to learning and development, just simply knowing that, or from the employee side, knowing that they are encouraged to learn and to develop within their organization is a key indicator. What we've seen, that many employees or most employees then feel that they are engaged, just knowing that they have that and that they're encouraged to do that. From our end, as the L&D function, we can then provide transparent communication about what resources are available and that it's critical for us to help them and let them know that this is really a priority that we feel for them as well. And namely, I just want to provide a little bit of background of what we do here at Namely, kind of in each of these areas. And this is something in this first area that we reinforce from day one. This is part of our onboarding with our employees. We talk about, for example, I'll talk more about this later, but we talk about our professional development programs, where employees can submit requests for reimbursement to attend conferences and to take courses and to join professional organizations or whatever they need. And we provide them access to content and to other training throughout the year. And this is something that they know that they can take, but it's encouraged for them to do so. On the career opportunity side, it's critical for employees to see, to actually visualize what opportunities there are before they get disengaged. And learning and development can help as well to kind of keep those goals on track for them. And we, again, at Namely, we start this in onboarding. We promote and we talk about setting stretch goals for somebody, for themselves, and what that means, and not to just be complacent, and really to use your opportunities of just your daily work as a way to grow in what you know and what you learn. And that can also be stepping stones to the next step of where they want to develop. Our managers here at Namely are encouraged to have annual career growth conversations with their employees, but not only just have that one conversation and leave it and go. They should be checking in quarterly and making sure that those career aspirations aren't changing. And if they are, what can we do as an organization to, what can we do to support them? What projects might they be interested in? What opportunities in learning do we already have that we can send their way? We also have professional development plans that can be used here by managers and their employees together or individually. I myself, as the L&D lead, will encourage folks to come to me and talk to me about what they're interested in, and I can brainstorm with them about what that looks like. Now, goal setting, clear expectations, this is also something that's really something near and dear to my heart. Goal setting is, again, I know I've used this word a few times, but it's critical to employee engagement. Without goals, it's really easy for an employee to fall completely disinterested in their work, or worse, believe that they're not doing valuable work. And so setting clear goals that have some important qualities, which I'm going to go into, can help steer an employee more towards feeling really engaged, feeling really valued, feeling very heard. And while, some goals absolutely have to be company set, respond to a call center inquiry within 24 hours or achieve X amount in new ARR, right? Those are things that are coming sort of top down from the organization. And I don't think those are ever really going to go away. But there is an important opportunity at that point to have conversations with your employees, getting buy-in, understanding that how they feel about those goals, whether they're realistic, how achievable they are, and really how that's also going to help them in their career development. Another aspect of goal setting, which is incredibly important, is, you hear this phrase, I'm sure, a lot, cascading goals or aligned goals. There's a sort of a word of caution when it comes to cascading goals, and that you don't want your, let's say, executive level goals to be the exact same wording as your individual contributor goals. That's really not going to matter as much to them, or not necessarily matter, but it's not going to resonate with them as much if they don't feel that it's tangible to them, more relevant to them. So when cascading goals and aligning goals, make sure that it is relevant to the work that they're doing, and that there's a clear path to understand how their goal is contributing to a team's success, a department's success, and the overall company's success. There are some L&D initiatives that we've had at Namely. I think I've already mentioned it, and I'll probably mention it again. Coaching is a big program that we run at Namely, and this actually earlier on this year was a company level goal. We wanted to make sure that all of our managers had critical skills to be managers, to be effective people leaders. And we had not just, oh, hey guys, everyone take this training, but it was something that executive leadership was very clear that this was near and dear to our hearts, and was something that every manager should make a priority. And so you can even do that with some of the initiatives that you're doing. Think about how you can get leadership support, and that trickles down so everyone understands that is definitely a priority and something that the organization values. Another thing in terms of setting expectations is to make sure that the folks on your teams set personal goals for themselves. We touched on this kind of briefly, but knowing that an employee wants to develop their leadership skills, or wants to maybe grow into a new skill set, maybe move into a new department. Those are amazing conversations that can happen. And without asking the right questions, you never know. And that employee can quickly become disinterested. And so you can talk to them about what their learning and development goals are personally. In other words of caution there, be careful with an employee who just says, oh yeah, my goal is to get an MBA. Well, you can dive a lot deeper there. Why do they want that MBA? What can they do with that MBA? What is really their 5-10 year plan to do with that? And then now you can explore other options, right? Maybe there's other things that are more quickly accessible, other opportunities that are available for projects nearby. And so by setting those expectations for themselves and you understand what those expectations are, those employees can feel really, really engaged and really feel valued and heard at the company. And I think now we're going to pass it over to Mike to start talking to us about building out a program.
Great. Thanks, Chrissy. Fantastic information that you just shared with us. And I'm going to be echoing a lot of what Chrissy was saying, because in my career, many of the things that she promoted in the last segment are so critical to how you build out your program and things that you need to be thinking about before you go jumping into or altering the L&D program that you have. What I always think of when I'm thinking about this type of stuff, and in my career, I've always been trying to do three things for my employees: is to give them opportunity, skills, and recognition. Because those three things, if you can do those for your employees, you're going to be setting them up for absolute success. When you talk about opportunity, we're talking about the chance to actually take classes, to go out and grow as human beings. Because I mean, that's when you're really getting their hearts and their minds, right? And I know that might sound a little squishy and a little soft, but you have to think that before we get into the tactical stuff of building out your program, you really should start to think about the behavioral side. Be thinking about what's the ideology behind what you're trying to build. And what I mean by that is if you are thinking from an opportunity, skills, recognition perspective, then you're always going to be trying, and it's always going to be important for you to be giving your employees opportunities, which means giving them the time to grow, giving them the time to do courses. And that all dovetails into what we're going to be talking about in a second with building out the program. But then the skills, of course, people really connect when they feel like they're growing, when they've created something new, when they can do something they couldn't do the day before. And that's an intrinsic motivation, right? That really connects people. And then recognition, I think that's the biggest one that's missed. There's a lot of times we just don't realize how much a pat on the back or how much a great job or those types of recognition pieces are. So what I'm really trying to get around is that before we jump headlong into here's what we need to create, let's think about how these behavioral ideological things can influence what we're creating. I hope that all makes sense, because it's important to be thinking that, because we want employees, at least in my opinion, and what I've seen in my career is I want employees who are intrinsically motivated. I want ones that are giving me their discretionary energy, the ones that say, yeah, I'll do that, not because you're paying me more, or it's because I want to do that. I understand the vision and understand what we're trying to do together. I'm getting opportunities, skills, and you're recognizing me for my successes. So with that said, we can jump into building out the program and really starting to understand what are some of the steps, what are some of the tactical things that we want to do. And some of this is going to be very baseline, right? We're talking about determining what the learners, what do they want to learn, right? So when you're talking about this, there are a couple different ways you can go about this. As you can do it as a team, small teams. You can do it as an entire company. But again, I think going back to what Christy said, I absolutely love the fact that they make things important. She used the near and dear to our hearts term, which I absolutely love, because when management makes things important, right? When they think when it's a priority for them, guess what? Everybody falls in line, and it's a priority for them too. If we set these, hey, just do this, and you have some training, go check it out in our online, whatever university. A lot of times, if that's all it takes, then that's what the learner is going to put into it too. It's like, oh, it's not important to them. It's not important to me. So we want to determine what they want to learn. And we can do that through focus groups and surveys and so forth. You can do that. Here's another piece of that, though, I'd like to add on to that first step. It's not just about what they want to learn. I think it's also about what is it that we want them to know, right? So in this stage, when we're building out this part, it's not just about, well, what do you want to learn? It's about challenging those employees. And I'm sure you're thinking of some now that you might be thinking, man, if they only knew their potential, right? And I think that Charlie Brown said potential is the greatest burden in life, because I think that some people don't understand how much they have until somebody like us in a leadership role can help draw that out of them. So I think it's our job too in this first piece is to draw out and say, hey, here's what I think you're capable of. And also, what else do you want to learn? What are the things that pique your interest the most? And then the third piece of that, which again, I think is super important, is you can ask them, what do they want to share? What could they teach? What are they passionate about that they could share with other people in the organization? Because so often, I think as learning and development people, we think all of the answers are out there. It's in the next book. It's in that contractor or consultant that's going to come to our business. And I don't think we leverage enough the talent that's already around us and the things that people know, and just inspiring them to share it is such a huge thing. So when the first step is those three things is what I think. Determine what they need to learn or what they want to learn, what you're going to challenge them with, and then what they could offer to the company from a learning perspective as well. Step 2. So when we're building out this program internally, now we need to start putting some meat to the bone, or wheels to the ground. It's starting to, and money talks, right? So when we put money behind stuff, I think it's one of the greatest indicators that we're invested in something, that we think it's important, is when money starts to go into that. So creating budgets and creating opportunities for people to be champions for different parts. Like maybe there's a leadership, somebody who really wants to handle that and is going to start taking on more of the soft skill type leadership initiatives around that, and building a budget around what do we want our managers to learn. For example, when I was working at Build.com, when we built a program called the Emerging Leaders Program, and we just basically had managers look at all of the people on their teams and then nominate folks to come and be a part of this program, so that when we do have leadership positions open up, they were ready. They could speak the language. They knew what was expected of them, and they were already there at a base level because they went through this program. So we actually created folks and positions for people to do that, to manage those things. And then you start actually putting the courses together, right? Starting to understand what it is that we want to start to offer on a broad scale or by teams. So that's the big piece of it too, when you start to really get into the tactical pieces there. Step number 3 is communicating this out. Now, nothing happens until people know about it. I mean, you could have the greatest training in the world and the most exciting thing, but if nobody knows about it or is excited about it, then nothing is going to happen with that. So the first thing is to really sell it. I mean, I feel like we're salespeople as L&D professionals, that we need to sell it to not only the managers who are going to have to sell it to their teams, but sell it to the group too, to say, look, here's an opportunity that we are behind. It's near and dear to our hearts. These are things that we are encouraging you to do. And then here's the kicker though, actually allow them to do it. Because I know in several businesses that I've been in before, we expose on this idea that we're going to be letting people do all of this training, and then there's just no time for it. It's the first thing that gets stopped, right? Whenever there's an issue. So that's a big piece of it. I see a question here real quick. What is a DRI? It's a direct responsible individual. So I would think of it as a champion, somebody for that. Like I was saying, like if they're going to head up the leadership development part of the offerings, then there would be a DRI for that, like a champion who's going to make that stuff happen. And so the communication piece is so super important, and communicating with enthusiasm and charisma. And so that people really believe in what you're trying to do. So you can do this not only live with meetings and such, have it come from the directors of your organization, also setting up internal pages and really explaining those expectations that Christy was talking about. Like, hey, look, we're not just saying this to say it, and it's not a flash in the pan type thing. If you really want to do this, you got to do the hard work, and it has to happen after you say it. And because that consistency, the minute that you say it and it doesn't happen, you lose trust with your employees. And trust me, I've been there before, and it's not fun. So it's about, because you try to do too much, and I think that's the issue. Start small. Communicate to the team that you have these offerings coming out, and that training is an important part. And we encourage you to learn, and we encourage you to continue to grow in the organization. And this is how you're going to keep those intrinsically motivated folks here. The last step in the process is you can't just set it and forget it. This is not a Ron Popeil commercial, right? This is not the set it and forget it type thing. You have to make sure that you're caring and feeding for this new thing that you've developed. This quarterly check-ins and team reminders, you want to make sure that it's top of mind for folks. It comes out in your newsletter that you're talking about the different training opportunities. You're highlighting things, for instance, in certain areas. This month, we're talking about the sales skills training, if anybody wants to get involved in that. I think that's critical and important to make sure that you're always taking care of it, you're refining it, and working with people to make it better. Another thing we did at Build, which was great, is that we didn't do a newsletter because no one read it, but we did a podcast, and we called it the Buildcast. And we had this every other week. We would have these things that would talk about the different training opportunities, and they were short, 3 to 5 minutes. People could put their headphones on while they were working and listen to it. They didn't have to watch a video or read it. So how are you going to communicate the message out to continue to do that? And what I always say is that it's important to have a plan, right? So at least have the first 3 months of what you're going to be doing like laid out, right? So that you can consistently send something out and consistently keep it top of mind for folks. The rubrics piece, that would be like a way of assessing, right? So the rubrics, what like when you're looking at what people are getting out of it, and you're looking at what they're trying to accomplish, the goals and those types of things. That's what a rubric you put together to really start to assess those courses, right? So there's a lot of information online about rubrics and how to create those. You can look those up later. But anyway, if you can do those 4 things, at least in my opinion, in my experience, that's how you're going to help get the hearts and the minds of your employees and help build a program that can be sustainable.
Yeah, Mike, that's amazing. And I love all of the steps that you just included. And I think that if somebody follows any of those steps, they're going to just have a solid program. It's simple. It's if you follow these simple steps, you're going to have a dynamite program. And it's, if we go to those fundamentals, if we make sure that we check in all of those things along the way, we know that we've done everything that we can to ensure that we're delivering really top quality programs.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks. I think the big thing though is just remember that there are 2 pieces of this. You can put the best program together, but if you're not capturing them from a behavioral side as well, getting them to understand and buy into what you're doing, I think you're going to miss somewhere if you don't have both of those pieces. And I think if you don't remember anything else from what I said, think about what you want to do before you do it, and think about what you want to accomplish and what it's going to be like for those learners and what you're going to ask of them and what you're going to contribute and commit to before that all begins. Thanks, Christy.
No problem. No, thank you. And speaking of developing programs, we wanted to go through just some examples of some of the programs that we've come across and some programs that we maybe do here at Namely. And Mike, feel free to chime in if you have some variations of what you guys do at Litmos. And some of these have also come our way from some of the companies that we work with. And what I want to also stress is I'm giving examples of some programs and going to talk through them. And feel free to chime in on the Q&A if you want more detail. We can go into that later on, but modify these. Not every single thing, and this is kind of going back to what Mike was just talking about, not every single program built the exact same way is going to work in your organization. You will need to modify these to fit your culture, to fit your budgets, to fit your, everything, what your employees want. If we have a really amazing program that's been put together and it's worked wonderfully at Namely, it might fall flat at Litmos because it's not what the folks there want. So always make sure that you're thinking first and foremost of what fits the culture, what fits the needs, and what fits the wants of the folks around you. So kind of a first example is a master class. Some people call these lunch and learns. You could use a couple of different ways. If we talk the classic lunch and learn side, your organization, I'm sure, is chock full of experts. That's why you brought them on board. You guys want top talent. We want top talent. And that top talent breeds other top talent. And so we could just get somebody into the room. And what we've done here at Namely is I've partnered individually with some of those experts, we call them our resident experts, and worked with them on the learning side to make sure that some of their presentations were a little bit more instructionally design sound, but really let the content to them and let them sort of run with it. And this really had a twofold win for us. On the one side, all of our employees who attended this lunch and learn, or we call them skill workshops, were able to leave there learning something new. But in many cases, the individuals we had, and these could have been anywhere from individual contributors all the way up to C-suite leading these workshops, they might not have had an opportunity to have FaceTime with these other individuals in the company, may not have had an opportunity to do public speaking before. And for them, that was a new experience. So really, it kind of did several things at once. Now, another example that came through us on what we were calling the master class was, and I'm sure many companies have, and I mentioned Namely has, professional development programs where somebody can go to a conference, to a course, to a workshop. But oftentimes that's where that learning ends, and that person goes, they attend, That's wonderful. And we need to bring them back in to share that knowledge with us. And so have them host a masterclass. I went to this workshop about project management. This is what I've learned. And that, I think, would be more powerful, not only again for the people attending that type of workshop, that master class, but for your learner who went to the workshop in the first place. You're reinforcing it. You're putting them in a position of leadership with the folks around them, even if they're not in a leadership position. And giving that opportunity would really, really be wonderful. Now, an annual class budget, this is another wording for the professional development program that I spoke about before, where employees receive funds to go take classes, attend programs, and kind of following off of what we just talked about. After a class, an employee can do a 45-minute presentation to teach the company about what they've learned. And this doesn't necessarily have to be to the company, right? If I'm not on the engineering team and I don't need to know, C# or anything, then I think that's a little bit more interesting for the folks on that team. So we don't need to say, all right, this is now open to every single person. You can maybe curate those attendee lists down to who it might be most appropriate for. And namely, we have the way that we structure our class budgets is we set department budgets for enrollment in the various programs that I've spoken about. And these are managed by department leaders. And then if I wanted to attend a course or workshop, I would go to my boss and I would talk through that and make sure that it was the right solution. Remember back from setting my personal goals, my manager or maybe somebody in learning and development might have an alternative solution than what I've come up with. That might be better, might not be better, but let's have that conversation. And then my department leader would ultimately sign off on it, and then I'm able to go. And this really just works whatever size organization, what type of budget you have to dedicate to this type of program. That's really all going to change. And so I think depending on your company. So that's something that if you're going to implement, if you haven't implemented something like this, you'd want to reflect on. And if you have already implemented something like this, go back and look, how is it being adopted? This is something that we're looking at right now at Namely. We're looking through what types of programs are being used. Are there common threads in certain areas, in certain departments that we're not seeing in other departments? Is this because we have to go back and reinforce with our managers how to promote the program? Is this going back to our employees that it exists, right? Going back and communicating. Mike mentioned this before. If you have the greatest program in the world and nobody knows it exists, they're not going to take advantage of it. So take a look at that from time to time. Even if you're not directly managing it, you're spearheading learning and development, right? And so you can take that interest to make sure that these programs are being used, they're being used effectively, and your employees at your company are really getting the most out of it. Another thing that's really fun, and this is probably one of the most fun weeks that we have at Namely as well, is Hack Week. And this is a popular event where people who are not maybe necessarily in engineering get a chance to build a new feature, build a new tool, or even just work on something different that they haven't had the opportunity to, that gets them involved with other people at the company. At Namely, our hackathons, we have people who are from our client success teams or our marketing team create these amazing features that they partner with some engineers who know how to code it. They work together. They're exploring other individuals at the company that they might not have ever had the opportunity to work with before. There's a lot of camaraderie that comes out of it, a lot of fun. And some of those features that have come out of our hackathons are actually in Namely. And that's really awesome for the people who were able to participate in that, who might not have necessarily realized that they had the opportunity to do that. We've even seen of other companies, I think it was Dropbox, they encourage their hack weeks for employees by giving them an opportunity to work on anything they want. Any project that they think is cool, that week is the week they have to work on it. And I think that's a really awesome thing, kind of going back to talking through leadership support. And having these weeks or days or whatever it is where somebody can explore something new, you never know what can come out of that. What somebody then learns and becomes passionate about can get great returns back to your organization. So giving somebody that opportunity to stretch their wings a little bit is really, really fun to watch. Another thing that's kind of an interesting thing, we heard that Method does this, is to do a job swap for a day. And this is where you can create engagement by having employees walk a day in another person's shoes. And so, for example, they can be the receptionist for the day. They can be in marketing for the day. They can maybe shadow me in learning and development for the day. And we have a lot of junior employees who wind up joining into, let's say, our client success organization, whose career aspirations, if we talk to them 5-10 years later, they usually, or not usually, but many times they'll tell us that they're interested in maybe going into product, or they're interested in joining the HR team here at Namely, the people team. And so doing a job swap or job shadowing program, if you will, can give them that opportunity to learn. And this is something that I talk about a lot of my past. I actually went to my community college my first 2 years of school, and that's exactly what that did for me. It gave me the opportunity to explore all sorts of things. I went in thinking, I'm going to be a journalist. And I came out not wanting to be a journalist anymore because I had tried it and it wasn't for me. And so, but I had then tried working in teaching other people stuff. And that's a really simple, very poor way of explaining what I do, but I loved it. And so I just sort of pursued that line because I had been given the opportunity in my formative years to explore a different opportunity. And yeah, I liked that. I didn't like the other, and now I knew better. And so giving the people on your team a chance to explore those, itches that they maybe have not been able to scratch, they now know, yes, that's something I want to go in. And then you guys can talk through that. That's part of their learning and development plan. That's part of their career development plan you can walk through. And if they don't like it, well, maybe they realize that they're happy where they are in that particular role. Maybe that gives them a different view of what their future looks like. So you never know. I'm a really big supporter of job shadowing programs. It's a really great try it before you buy it opportunity. Especially for the folks that are in your junior roles. You don't know unless you really give them a chance to kind of explore where they might wind up. And cohorts of programs. Cohorts of programs is something that Namely has found to be fundamentally critical and important to a lot of the major programs that we run. We've run, I mentioned coaching a few times, manager training. We've run peer trainer type, train the trainer type programs. And when we've run these, we've been running them as cohorts. And there's a nomination process to attend some of these programs because if we're bringing in a vendor, we don't have the opportunity to have every single person attend for every single group. And so we make sure that people are, one, they're telling their managers, they're telling their leadership that this is something they're interested in. Two, they're being recognized for the successes they've already had and given the opportunity to attend these programs. And then being a cohort together, we make sure there's always a mix. There's always a mix of people from every different department in these different programs, people who have never had a chance to interact with each other before, and then we force them to. And they come out, I had somebody, we ran a peer coaching cohort just in October, and one of the attendees of that program came over to me and said that was his favorite part. He got to interact with people he never met before. He got different experiences, different backgrounds to apply to what he was thinking about coaching, and heard of other people's pain points and other people's experiences that really opened up his eyes that there was a lot of other things going on. And a lot of those people are still friends. We see them practicing the skills they learned together. We see them saying hello in the hallways and going to lunch together, people who weren't even on the same floor and are now really good buddies. And they were all excited about learning together. It was kind of like we're in it together in the trenches. Some of the programs we run are intensive, 2-3 week programs. And they were there together and they supported each other. They learned from each other and they brought really unique perspectives. And this is actually something that I really, really enjoyed doing for our coaching program that we ran earlier on this year. There are absolutely a lot of tools that help drive employee engagement. And there's two in particular that I know that Mike and I are going to start talking through. I just wanted to quickly, of course, talk through Namely. And for any of you who are familiar with Namely, you'll know a lot of the tools that I'm speaking to. But even if you haven't ever logged into Namely, you'll pretty have a good idea for how these could work in your organization. Namely is awesome for having this social media quality to it with our news feed. And our employees here at Namely, we love it. We're always posting, we're always sharing pictures, and we're always sharing information with each other. But on the learning and development side, this is where I communicate heavily with my organization. Mike said it, and I really couldn't agree with this more. If people don't know that you're running these programs, they're not going to attend. With the news feed, I'll share information about, hey, did you know that we have this program running next month? Or ask your manager if you'd like to attend. We can use it to share information about required training. Right now, we are going through a round of anti-discrimination and harassment training for all employees, and communication about that went out through our news feed. It goes to everyone's email inbox, and then it lives in our news feed where people can comment. And for our cohort of coaches, they were all really excited to have passed. And I could even speak more to, I know where a question came in about rubrics before. We use rubrics heavily in that program. And we posted all of our photos of our newly certified coaches on the news feed to congratulate them, to share that, we were sharing in their success together. And it wasn't just coming from me. Other people around the company were congratulating them, and it really became a group effort. And just promoting programs in general. We have buddy programs. So if I want buddies to sign up for greeting our new hires, I'll put information up there. If I'm having one of those master classes, I'll post up a registration link up there. And this is just a really easy way for me to communicate with everybody without listservs and email distribution lists and all that. Something else that we spoke about, or I spoke about a little bit earlier on, is also goal setting. And we use Namely for our goal setting here. And it allows us to very clearly align our goals, to track our progress on our goals. But most importantly, it helps facilitate conversations about what our goals are and all the things I just spoke about. What's been done to date? What did we realize in the beginning that we maybe misscoped a goal, or that we overstretched ourselves, or that we didn't stretch ourselves enough? Are we really contributing to the overall company? Are we contributing to what our team is trying to accomplish? And that really helps us store and track information, but most importantly, drives conversations that can happen with all of our employees together. We also use our resources section in Namely. If you have any place where you can just store a bunch of information, user guides, links to important places, we use our Namely resources for that too. So I'll host content there for my manager training, any user guides that I might have for them, reference materials, our professional development program forms that we have, and guides for managers and employees to use that, and employee development plans that we store in there. So anyone can stumble upon it, but if I just left it in resources and then didn't follow up with that constant communication, then people aren't going to find it by themselves necessarily. So we point them there, and it just really is an easy way for us to keep everything in one place. And I'm going to pass it back over to Mike.
Thanks, Chrissy. So another big piece of the structure of having any strong L&D program, of course, is having a place to put everything for all of your training, something that anyone can access anytime from anywhere. And that's where we come in. Litmus is all about, is a learning management system that is completely connected to so many different marketplaces. And I'm going to walk you through a little bit of how we see ourselves in the L&D. In fact, I was actually a Litmus customer before I became an employee. Again, working at Bill.com, as I mentioned earlier. We met them back in 2011 and became customers at that point because I just really believed in the product, believed in the people. And I loved it so much that here we go. In 2017, I'm actually a part of the company now. But it was a very simple, very strong structure, because structure produces behavior. So whatever you want to see happen has to come from a strong structure. And that our Lenny is right in the middle of what we do. And then the next ring out is all of the marketplaces that we connect to. So when you put all of your courses, you put all of your classes, you put that type of consumable things for, like what we do here at Litmus is that we use our LMS for external, for our customer training on our platform, but we also use it for internal training for all of the new hires and the staff that come through it. So there's one place to keep track of all of our live courses, all of our online courses, and it's one system of record for all of our employees and one place to go. But that doesn't mean we don't connect with all of these other things. Salesforce is a big one, ADP, being able to pull in through APIs, all sorts of information there. The next circle out, which is what we're really excited about now, is that we just want to make it very simple for you to be able to do your job and not have to do it incredibly, have to go out of your way to make that happen. So we have off-the-shelf content now that is remarkable and exciting and interesting and fully mobile, and we want to make sure that that's easy for anyone, anywhere to do. And then the second to last ring out there, of course, is how we structure the product. We have a learning management system, commerce features where people can sell content, a coaching feature, and then our enablement platform that brings a lot of that together. But you can see that the big ring at the outside is what we're the most proud of, is that we have this augmented intelligence piece where we're bringing people together, and we're making things very simple and automated for you to be able to start to say, to build out this continuous learning suite where, let's say that you have a new person coming on board and you assign them to this learning path in our system based upon what they already have. Because I know if you have a salesperson who's come into your team that's been doing it for 20 years versus someone who this is their first job, they're going to have different things that you're going to want them to take. And this is a way for it to be able to pull that data and information and then automatically offer classes for you. And these are the things that we're really excited about going forward. But again, just like Namely, and what a fantastic product to keep communication and keep people connected and to manage all of that side of the business. I mean, I'm not sure why we don't use it. It's a fantastic product. Litmos is on that. Where do you keep all of the stuff, right? Where do you keep all of the training? How do you measure it? How do you track it and assess it? And that's where we come in. So I think together, those two things, of course, many other tools out there for you, but these are really good opportunities for you to just really start building a strong foundation for your L&D program.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. Great stuff from both Mike and Christy. And a huge thanks to everyone who jumped in and joined us today. I think we all got a lot of takeaways from it. The session was recorded, and we will be sending it out to everyone who registered. And we'll pass the slides, and we can even send the notes around as well, just in case you missed anything. As you can see on the screen, we have information about both the products we just mentioned, Namely and Litmos. Feel free to reach out to either of our teams via the website or via email. And we've been collecting quite a few questions in the Q&A section. The Q&A section is actually now open. I think what we can do now is pass it back to both Mike and Chrissy to cherry pick a couple of those good ones that I think we could add some more color to in the remaining 15 minutes or so here. We might not go the full distance, but just so we can make sure your questions get answered. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Christy, who will repeat the question and then follow up with more information.
Sure. There was definitely one question I wanted to just circle back to. We had a question that came in about the cohorts of programs. That is it just about having mixed groups? And I think to some degree it might be. It's kind of that simple. Of one of the things that we find that our employees, when we're talking about engagement, a lot of it is that they feel socially connected to one another. It's easy for siloing to happen in any organization. And we as learning and development can give ourselves a grassroots project to try to eliminate that and get people in front of others at the organization. And so through cohorts of programs, they're learning new skills, which are valuable to them, but they're also being exposed to people in other areas of the company they wouldn't have had the opportunity to before. And the types of questions, the types of problems that they bring to that skill that they're learning, then that other person in another area of the company didn't think about that, didn't realize that that was an issue, or didn't realize that that was, that's something that I didn't even think of before. And so you're really broadening their horizons while also getting them involved with meeting and becoming friends with other people at your company. So yeah, I think it is kind of, if we want to drill it down and kind of distill it to the simplest thing, it's about mixing up your groups. But what you get out of that in terms of engagement, we're already starting to collect data, and we're noticing that it is affecting our engagement scores. So it's really great.
Great.
Well, let's see here. I wanted to talk, somebody had a question about rubrics. What should rubrics include? And this is something, I've spoken about it a lot, but it's a big initiative in 2017, our coaching program. And our rubric for our coaching, we've made our coaching program a certification program, which meant that we really did need to grade somebody on how well they were performing. And there were key skills that we expected. I'm sure in your organization, you have important skills and competencies that you expect your employees to have. And this is really no different. So coming away from this program, for example, in coaching, we expected somebody to have excellent listening skills. And how were we able to observe that? We did an observable role play for this particular program. And so we were able to observe listening had happened with the type of reflection that happened and summarization that had happened. We were looking at the types of questions. Were open-ended questions being used, or were closed-ended questions being used? And were they following the models that we were using for coaching? And so we were able to check that off on our rubric. Those were the skills that allowed us to say, yes, pass, or let's try again. Let's dive a little bit deeper. So when you're about your rubrics, really think about what those key takeaways are, what your learning objectives were for that program, and that will actually really influence what your rubric will look like. Let me see. I'm just looking through the questions here to see if there's anything else that I want to jump into. Or Mike, do you see any questions in the Q&A that you wanted to jump into?
Sarah brings up some good questions. How do you determine the content for the cohorts or the master classes? Now, we did something similar at Build. I got to be a mad scientist at Build.com for the 6 years I was there. It was we sold toilets on the internet. We were in the home improvement space, and we just a little company that was really a startup out of a garage. So we got to take a lot of chances and risks. And what I loved about that is that I got to try out a lot of different things. And how do we come up with content? We did something similar to a master class where we actually held a summer camp, and we themed the entire company as a summer camp with mock fire pits in all the departments. And we had cabin groups, each of the departments with their own, and they'd build their own cabin flags. And basically what we did was a big open space project. If you just Google open space, and you'll see it's a great technique for getting people to teach each other things really fast and really furious. And one of the great things that we did is we came up with content, when they came up with content of what they felt like they could teach or they wanted to learn. And we were able to use that, and we got far more than we could possibly do in the 4 weeks that we set aside to do this summer camp thing. And we were able to learn what was really on their mind. And so what was great about that was really understanding from them what they wanted to learn. And of course, there were certain things that we, as a company, were very near and dear to our hearts, that we wanted to make sure communication's a big one. We did some trust workshops with the upper management. So as we saw things poke up, we would start to put together things around that. But our biggest success is when we ask the people, when we ask the folks, and we actually leverage them or involve them, enroll them in our vision of teaching each other what to do. So it was a fantastic experience. If anybody wants to learn more about that, I'd be happy to tell you how. I mean, it's been going on for 3 years now, and it's pretty fantastic what we were able to do with zero budget.
Ton had also a really great question. He said, can you share some experiences on L&D involving virtual teams and how the Namely solution facilitates it? We have lots of virtual teams at Namely. We're not necessarily virtual, but I'm based out of our New York office, and we have offices in San Francisco, Austin, and building in Atlanta too. And so it's difficult for being a learning and development team of one, make sure that we're accurately engaging everyone in the other departments, and they don't feel like, oh, well, L&D is just something that you get in New York. And so to do that, we have leveraged Namely to discuss the availability of programs. We work closely with our leadership team as well to see if the team has the availability to actually bring that person on site. And then we'll also use tools like Zoom that we're in right now to make sure that we're effectively engaging that person through virtual training. And this is a skill I think that every L&D person who does any type of facilitation is desperately needs to take on, is how to effectively train somebody virtually. It's essentially the same, but you need to do a lot more of face-to-face. You need to make sure that that video camera is on. You need to make sure their video camera is on. You need to make sure that they are asking questions, and if they're not, you're asking them questions. And this way you can make sure that those people are getting involved. That's actually the easy part. I think part of what Tan's question was initially was, how do you get them involved? And it's really about the communication around those programs. And so we'll use the Namely newsfeed. We'll have information posted in a resources section. But really, I think in making somebody feel engaged who's not local, it shouldn't be completely virtual. That needs to be a communication from their manager. That needs to be somebody reaching out to them personally to say, we want you to be engaged in this. Is this something that you're interested in? What would you be interested in? And then make sure that you're meeting those needs with them and working through the virtual part separately. That's honestly the easy part. It's just making sure that you are keeping that virtual employee or those other offices that are not in your headquarters, understanding that you still value them, you still value their development, and even though they might not be here in your headquarters, you're still going to do everything you can to get out to them or get them back to you. Let's see. I think there was another question in here that I wanted to touch on. Morgan asked how to do a hack week for non-tech companies. And then I want to kind of tie that into Rhiannon's question about how we can make sure that these hack weeks are not negatively affecting a high growth team or a high productivity team. And I think they're kind of similar and kind of different in a couple different ways. So for the non-tech side, there probably are other programs going on at your organization. And similar to the thing I was talking about earlier on in getting your employees the opportunity to shadow or to try new opportunities, if you've got, it doesn't have to be a week, it doesn't have to be a whole program. Maybe you have a certain number of seats available to join a new marketing campaign, to sit in on a product conversation where you're sort of discussing where things are going to be going and your strategy, and bring in people into that conversation. You never know what kind of outside experiences they can bring. And then you can even give your employees the opportunity to try out. If you have like an internship program, or if you've been an intern somewhere, it's kind of similar to that, where they're still effectively working on a project. Doesn't have to be hacking a feature or hacking a tool in software, but it could just be as simple as, let me help with that marketing campaign. In terms of being in high growth situations or high productivity situations where setting aside everyone's day-to-day for a week or a few days is really going to detract from your organization's productivity, then instead of spending that week doing brand new things, spend that week, as I was just saying, trying to mix it up. People working on different things, different projects that are still driving the company ahead, still driving your strategy ahead. And so it's not so much a grassroots project, but you're still letting people try new things and give them the chance to sign up for the ones that interest them most. And I don't know, Mike, do you have any other thoughts on that one? That's kind of my initial thoughts.
I think you hit it right on the head. And it is tough. I think time's the biggest issue, because a lot of the stuff that we teach, of course, is ivory tower in a perfect world. And then everyone says, but I don't have time for that. So how, at some point you just got to, again, it has to become important enough that the time's made. And it's a tough thing. I mean, it's really, really difficult to do if you just can't carve it out. But I think your example of doing some, making sure that people have the opportunity to try some different things and still working on things that are mission critical to the company, I think that's a really great example of one way that you could do that.
All right, we have Anonymous asked what recommendations we have to keep people accountable for their self-directed learning, and that they have an annual class budget, but they're at their company and that they've sent reminder emails, but it's nearing the end of the year. I mean, self-directed, but if you were to get that, what's the word I'm looking for? If you get somebody to hold themselves accountable through professional development planning earlier on in the year, and then lean on your leadership, on your managers to check in regularly, and asking the question of just how's it going, and having that person reflect on whether or not they've done anything to date, or whether there's anything left, or maybe they've started on that track of self-directed learning, but didn't really like it, and that's maybe why they're stopping. So having constant communication, and as learning and development, especially in smaller organizations, we can't from L&D have those conversations with every one of our employees every day. but we can make sure that leadership does, and that during their weekly one-on-ones, they're reinforcing that there's either a need. I don't know from the question of whether or not your self-learning courses are required or not, but if they're something just purely personal, then have them follow up with their managers all the time. If it's something that's required, then you can look towards your learning management system to send reminders, and I'm sure Mike can chime in on that, but to send reminders and to follow through. Right now, for example, we're doing, as I mentioned, anti-discrimination and harassment training company-wide. And at this point, what I've been doing on my end is I've been tracking who has been completing it, who hasn't. And I've been in constant communication with the senior leaders of each department and letting them know exactly how many of the people on their team have and have not done it. But in a collective email. So all the senior leaders can see how their peers' teams are doing. And a little bit of friendly competition doesn't hurt anything. So actually, when I sent out my last email letting certain teams know that they were at either 0% completion or maybe less than 20% completion, we noticed that some emails went out and some Slacks went out, and all of a sudden I had about 50 people that completed it. So, and I mean, it's certainly an important thing that we need to make sure it's something that's, held very valuable to us. It's in our core values, namely to make sure that we do those things. But that doesn't mean that I can't use simple L&D techniques like making leadership compete against each other.
That's right on. When I was working at Les Schwab, we had what we called the no bad dog list. And that was the thing that made people get their training done the fastest, which is exactly what you said. Sent it out to everybody, full visibility. And it was like, oh, nope, I'm not going to be on that list. And people were proud of themselves. Like, I wasn't on the list this month. I know it's not the right motivator from an L&D perspective, but if you have to, sometimes that does happen. I mean, of course, there's lots of technology to keep people reminder. Litmus does a lot of stuff with the tech. But again, going back to the very first stuff that I was saying is that it comes back down to what's relevant. Adult learners crave relevancy, and they want to know what they're doing is important because their time is scarce. And I think what's important to leadership will be important to the people down the chain, right? So if like you said, Christy, perfectly, was you got to get those leaders involved and have them talking and make it important. And then guess what? Their teams will make it important. But if you're not doing that and they're like, oh yeah, you've got to do this training and whatever, and then they never check in with them, of course they're going to have the same attitude about it. So really good advice.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Well, I think we just about covered it from a Q&A perspective. We've had a lot of insightful stuff come in, and thanks to both Mike and Christy for taking the time at the end of this webinar to go through those. If you haven't gotten your question answered and you'd like more information, just follow up with the information on your screen to the respective parties. Christy's from Namely, Mike's from Litmus, and I'm sure they'd both be happy to answer any follow-up questions you have from the content. And like I said, this webinar was recorded. We're going to go ahead and send it out as soon as it's processed and up on the interweb. And we will also include the slides on that same page that we'll send out. And other than that, I think we're all set. A huge thank you to Christy and a huge thank you to Mike for pulling this together and producing the content and presenting today. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. All right. Everyone have a great rest of your day. And like I said, follow up with us if you have any other questions. All right. Signing off. Goodbye.